Hey everyone, hey, welcome. Thanks so much for coming out to today's live stream. Welcome if you're new. Welcome back if you've been here before. And hello if you happen to be watching this video on YouTube afterwards. I will be sharing it there. So if you miss this live, you'll be able to check it out on my YouTube channel. If you don't know, I am Axel from Get Speaking English, and today we are going to be talking about smart cities and looking at a task that's similar to the ones that you find on part 2 of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So for those of you who aren't aware, I have been talking about sustainability a lot on my social media channels, all over Facebook, Telegram, Instagram. And so if you want more information about this topic, more ideas, more vocabulary, be sure to check everything out on social media. There's lots of posts there. And so today we're going to be talking about smart cities, specifically talking about the part 2 of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So feel free to say hello in the chat. I have the chat open. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it. I know sometimes I'm not the best, but I'm going to try and check for comments, and you're more than welcome to say hello. And as we go through this lesson, also feel free to throw out your ideas about the activities, so we can all come up with lots of vocabulary and ideas about talking about this topic, about talking about the task. And then afterwards, I will compile all of our notes together. I will upload this video to YouTube, upload the notes, so we can all have this as a reference moving forward and get speaking English all about sustainability. All right, so just before we start, I thought it's probably just important really quickly to get clear about what exactly is a smart anything. So we'll hear about smart cities, we'll hear about smartphones, smart TVs, smart appliances. What does that mean? So if something is smart, it usually means that we're talking about devices or objects that are somehow either usually connected to the internet, and they use technology, they use the internet to enhance their functionality somehow or do things more efficiently. So when talking about cities, we're talking about, urban areas, obviously, that use digital technology and the internet maybe to collect data about the people who happen to be living and working there. And then they would use that information to basically operate services. So maybe they would manage the traffic lights in the city, for example, or maybe they would use it to determine when to turn the heating on and off in certain buildings, or the air conditioning, or the lighting, different things like that. So they would basically use the data collected from the internet, from technology, and use it to deliver those services. So that's kind of what we're talking about here today. So smart cities. And as I mentioned, this lesson in particular is also going to be focused on the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So it is sort of aimed at preparing students for those two exams. However, a lot of these topics, a lot of the vocabulary, the phrases, will also be helpful for other exams, such as the IELTS exam, TOEFL, also just for different general English exams, but also for anybody who just wants to speak English at an upper intermediate and an advanced level, right? So, yeah. And here today, we are going to do a bit of a warm-up activity. We're going to look at vocabulary, just some ideas about how we can improve our cities. And then, as I said, we're going to look at a part 2 task. So one similar to the part 2 task of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. It's the activity where you have to compare and contrast the images. So we're gonna check out some images. We're gonna brainstorm some vocabulary, think of some phrases and things like that that will be helpful for responding to that task. And that, as I mentioned, too, this video, the notes and everything, I will put together. I will put it up on YouTube, so you will have that as a resource moving forward, and it'll help you get speaking about this topic. And one final little thing. So I mentioned that right now I'm talking about sustainability. So this topic, smart cities, is also based on this article, What It's Like to Live in the World's Smartest Cities for 2024. And I did a live the other day too, where I went through this article. I read it so you could hear the pronunciation, talked about some of the vocabulary. And I'm offering conversation classes based on this article, as well as other articles addressing sustainability. So if you want even more opportunities to talk about this topic, you can go ahead, you can book that class. Actually, the material that we're looking at today actually comes from the lesson that I put together for this, about this article. So this will give you a bit of an idea about maybe the kind of things that you'll find in those lessons. So feel free to join me for a conversation class all about this. Okay, so let's move on. Like I said, you are more than welcome to throw out your ideas about these tasks or about these questions, and I'm going to compile all of the notes together, and hopefully collectively we will come up with lots of vocabulary, a lot of phrases for talking about smart cities and talking about sustainability. Okay, all right, so just as a bit of a warm-up, let's just think about improving your city. So think about your current city or town. What could be done to improve it? So, and here's some ideas that we can think about. So cleanliness, so how clean something is. Safety, pretty obvious. Education, green spaces, so areas that are not occupied by roads or buildings and things like that, but parks and natural areas. Also amenities, so the different buildings or services that are located in a city or in a neighborhood that just basically make life a little bit more enjoyable for people. So let's think about those things. And again, feel free to throw out your ideas. I have some of my ideas as well. And hopefully we'll learn some good vocabulary from them. All right. So let's think about, let's talk about safety first, maybe. So safety, number one, right? So, when I think about some of the places that I've lived, and even my current town, one thing they could add is potentially more street lights, right? So the lamps, the lights that are on the streets, right? So street lights, and they're particularly great, on dark streets or in parks, and that would make people feel a lot safer at night, right? And potentially also cut down on crime, which just basically means to reduce something. So to cut down on crime, something, reduce something. So definitely a little bit of a no-brainer, I think. Another thing too, potentially, maybe increasing the number of police and people police in the area. So for example, maybe there could be police patrols. So police officers that would basically walk around or patrol the area, just making sure that everything is safe and nothing bad is happening. Yeah, so making sure that there are police walking around busy areas to stop crime and help people. So that could potentially be something as well, right? And another thing too that seems to be kind of popular here in cities and or neighborhoods specifically is to do a neighborhood watch program. And basically what that is where, neighbors, they would watch out or they would look out for one another's safety. So, if something bad happens, for example, they could potentially intervene, so get involved and prevent it from stopping, or they could call the cops, they could call the necessary authorities, right? And they would basically watch out, they would look out for problems, right? And that would be done through a neighborhood watch program, right? So that could be something. What about education? Maybe let's think about education for a minute, right? So, one problem with education sometimes is like the lack of books or supplies, right? So maybe one thing that potentially could happen is maybe you could do a donation drive. So sort of an organized event where people would be encouraged to donate or give things. So in this case, a donation drive for school supplies for kids in need, right? So supplies, we're talking about all like the various things that a child would need when they go to school. So for example, pencils, paper, books, erasers, books as well. So we would use supplies to refer to that. So school supplies. We could also talk about, art supplies as well. If you're talking about art, for example, so all like the paints and the brushes and things. So school supplies would be great. And if we're talking about people in need or kids in need, just basically maybe they're a bit poor, right? Maybe they live in poverty, for example, and they're in need of help, basically. So that could potentially be one thing we could do, right? Another thing as well, potentially we could set up some after-school programs where students would get help with their homework. So maybe help from other members of the community, for example. That could be something. And an after-school program we could see here that would happen after school is finished, right? So some sort of place where they would be able to go and they would get help on their homework. That could be something. And if we talk about setting up something, we mean just basically organizing and organizing it, arranging it, so we could set up some sort of after-school program where people could get help. And another idea as well, too, potentially, communities could potentially offer, pay what you can English and computer classes to adults, for example, to help them get better jobs. So if something is pay what you can, this basically means that you pay as much money as you can afford. So maybe, for example, the class would typically cost $15, let's say, but you don't have $15. If it's a pay what you can class, maybe you only pay, $5, for example, or $10. So it's kind of a sliding scale. We might also refer to it as a sliding scale. But yeah, any pay-as-you-go program means that you basically just pay the amount that you personally can afford, and you do not have to pay the absolute maximum price. So that could definitely be something. How about amenities? So again, as I said earlier, amenities, those are sort of facilities or buildings, maybe. So for example, maybe like swimming pools or shopping centers, but even maybe post offices, dental offices, things like that. Things that are intended to make life a little more comfortable, make life easier for people who live in a neighborhood or in a city, for example. And one thing that sort of jumped to my mind is maybe to have more public washrooms in busy areas for people to use, right? So public washroom. And depending on where you are, there's different language. So here in Canada, we definitely say washroom all the time, but you might also refer to it as a bathroom or a restroom, even a lavatory. So just basically places where people can go to the washroom and they can wash up afterwards. So more of those would be great in busy areas, obviously. Another potential thing too, right? Maybe water fountains or drinking fountains. So just another way of saying that could be useful, especially near, parks or recreational areas or shopping areas as well. So people can access water while they are out and about. And of course, too, potentially rest areas. That could be something as well. So rest areas maybe with some benches or some shade for people to relax in. The benches we know there's sort of those seats that you could use to sit on. And we talk about shade. Let's see here for a second. We talk about shade, we're talking about let's see his picture here. Sort of areas that are shaded from the sun, right? So we can see here that these tables, they are located in the shade, so they're not directly in the sun. And that would definitely create a cooler, better place for people to relax in, right? So areas with shade definitely could be one thing that we could do. Yeah. And again, feel free to throw out your ideas as well. What do you think would make your city a better place to live in? Thinking about these areas. I know I've definitely been in some places where there could have been more green spaces. So so green spaces. And actually I've personally loved living in places with community gardens. So a community garden is basically a place where members of the community can come together, they can rent a portion of the garden, and they can grow their own plants and vegetables. So I have a bit of a picture here. Actually, you can see this community garden. You can see here how the land has been divided into these raised beds. We would call this a raised bed. And members of the community would maybe rent, or they would rent or just sign up to take care of part of the one of the beds, and then they would plant their own vegetables there. So that could definitely be something, and an example of a green space. Also, too, potentially some community playgrounds for children. And I'm sharing this picture here. I'm sharing this picture because often I get in conversations with students and they're like, what do we call these different things? So just really quickly, actually, I wonder if I should put it, I could put it here. Put it here and draw on it, maybe? See. Maybe not. Okay, I could draw on it. So, oh. I think I just lost my, oh, we're back. Okay. Sorry about that. I think I'm back now. Okay. Sorry about that. I just had a little internet hiccup, but I'm back now. So I'm sharing this picture because sometimes I get into conversations with students and they want to know what are all these things called? So just really quickly, so we can see here in this picture, we have a swing set. We have a swing set. I would call this thing a jungle gym. So we have a swing set and a jungle gym where kids can climb on, basically. I don't know, we can see it. Yeah, this isn't a great picture, but sometimes there are those bars that you can basically climb across. I would call those monkey bars. And we can also see here that there are a bunch of slides. So we have some slides. So lots of things for kids to like play on, basically, right? So all of those would be fantastic for a community playground, right? Yeah. All right. So let's look at a task then. Like I said, I have a task similar to the one that you will find on part 2 of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So during that part of the exam, you'll get a piece of paper with 2 photos if you're doing the B2 first exam, or 3 photos if you're doing the C1 advanced exam. And you have to talk about these photos for 1 minute. And there's always a question on the paper. So there's 1 question for the B2 first exam, and there's 2 questions for the C1 advanced exam. And you have to answer these questions while comparing and contrasting 2 of the photos. So on the B2 first exam, you only have 2 photos to choose from. So you don't have to make any decisions. But on the C1 advanced exam, you only talk about 2 photos, and you will have 3. So you do have to make a very quick decision, decide what you're going to talk about, and do the task. And you don't really have a lot of time to think about it either, because you basically just get the images, get the questions, and you have to basically just start talking. And then after that is done, your partner will get asked a question about your photos, and you also have to respond to a question about their photos when they do the task. Yeah, so here we're going to be talking about these 3 photos, sort of city-related photos. We can see one looks like some people are shopping, a bit of a traffic jam, and we also have a park. So the questions here, we have how can these things be improved by smart technology? Again, so using technology, using the internet to improve the functionality, enhance the services in these areas. And how many people benefit from the improvements? So just to start, let's just, describe these photos first. So we have three here. Let's do this one first. So let's talk about the photo of the traffic jam first. We have a street, obviously, right? It's very congested. And there's basically bumper-to-bumper traffic. So if there's bumper-to-bumper traffic, basically means there are no spaces between the cars. So there's no space. If you want to know specifically what a bumper is, it's this sort of this metal bit on the car. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's sort of like that metal bit on like the front, and there's also one on the back, right? And that's designed to sort of protect the car a bit in the case of collision, right? So in this case, there is no space between the bumpers, right? So it's bumper to bumper traffic. There are no spaces between the cars. And we might say that the traffic in this picture is really heavy. So we would use heavy a lot to describe traffic. And we could probably assume that this photo was taken during rush hour. So rush hour being sort of periods of the day where the traffic is heavier. So usually when people are commuting to and from work, so if they're commuting, they are making that journey from home to work. So there's usually some rush hour traffic around 6 or 7 in the morning, and then again some rush hour traffic when everybody gets off of work around 5 o'clock or so, right? So yeah, so this is probably rush hour traffic, and it looks like everyone is stuck in gridlock. So they're basically stuck. They cannot move. They're stuck in one place. That's kind of like what we would use to talk about being trapped in the middle of traffic, unable to move. And yeah, they're stuck in gridlock. So just another way to refer to having bumper to bumper traffic. And it looks like they are barely moving. So if something is barely happening, it means that it's really not happening at all. So they're probably moving at a very, very slow pace, at a snail's pace. Is what I wanted to say. Yeah, because they're kind of just crawling along, right? You also might hear people describing it as, as there being heavy congestion. So if something is congested, it means that it's blocked up and it's hard for things to pass through. So we'll talk about traffic congestion. So just another way to refer to when there's really heavy traffic like this and all of the streets are blocked up, right? Yeah. And I would assume too, as well, just because people are stuck in traffic and people are probably kind of angry and they are itching to get to their locations, it's probably very noisy. And a lot of drivers are blaring their horns. So kind of a collocation there. So blaring their horns. So that means that they are sounding their horns. The horns are very loud. They are blaring. So a blaring sound is just very noisy, extremely loud. So there's probably a lot of noise. The drivers blaring their horns. And drivers are probably pretty frustrated, right? I think it's pretty easy to get frustrated when you're waiting in traffic like this, when you're stuck in traffic. Yeah. Similarly, And this photo here, the one about the shop, it looks like they are stuck in a lineup. So again, they are kind of trapped in a lineup. And it looks like they are in what we would call a big box store. So if you hear about big box stores or big box retail stores, it's basically refers to a really physically large retail store. And usually they are part of a chain of stores. So a chain of something, basically where you will find sort of like the same version of something in other locations. So for example, like Starbucks coffee is a chain, or McDonald's is a fast food chain, right? So a big box store is often a chain of, or a big box store is often part of a chain of these really large retail stores. Yeah, and like I said, all of these people look like they're stuck in long lineups. And you know, they're waiting for the checkouts to pay, right? So a lineup, here we will call, you know, when people are waiting, they're like waiting here. So over here in Canada, in the United States, it's common to use it's common to refer to it as a lineup. In the UK, for example, they would probably call it a queue. And you can use it as a verb as well too. You can say like they are queuing at the register, for example. Here we don't really say that as much, but that's what that means. And you can see here that the spelling is very interesting. So this word is pronounced as queue. They are queuing. They're stuck queuing in a very long lineup. And they're waiting at the checkout to pay. So the checkout is basically where you would, there would be the cashier, so the person who takes the money and scans the item. And they're at the checkout, which is basically the machine that takes care of the money and things like that. So these people are at the checkout, they're waiting to pay. And we might also say that this store is pretty crowded, so there's lots of people, right? Lots of people everywhere. There's not a lot of empty space. I mean, I've seen it worse. I'm sure you have seen it worse as well. But oops, there's still a lot of people here. So yeah, so I would say that this is pretty crowded place. And finally, too, you know, maybe it is so crowded because there just are not enough registers that are open for the number of people. So again, register is just another sort of word for checkout. So there aren't enough registers open, maybe, for the number of people. And so for that reason, the lines are really slow moving, right? So we have a lot of slow moving lines, slow moving queue. A lot of people are waiting and they're kind of stuck there. And lastly, let's talk about the park. So we have this park. It looks pretty dark. And again, you know, feel free to throw out your own ideas as well, too, what we might say about these images. But yeah, we can see we have a park that's pretty dark or dimly lit, I might say. So lit being sort of like the past participle of light, right? So it's dimly lit. And there are only a couple of streetlights, right? So we can see, like, looks like the streetlight here, streetlight here. So not a lot of streetlights. It's very dimly lit. I might also say that this park looks pretty deserted, because there's no people around. We don't see any pictures. We don't see any people in this park. So it's deserted, and if something is deserted, it basically means that everybody has left, everybody has gone away. So it is deserted. Maybe they were there during the daytime and then they left. So they deserted the park. They are gone. And You know, we talked about the lighting, because there's not a lot of light. I might even say that the lighting is pretty sparse, right? So most of the park is in darkness because of that. So if something is sparse, it means that there's not a lot of it. It's very spread out. So in this case, we can see that, you know, there's not lights everywhere, right? We just have like one light here, one light here. It looks like maybe there's a light back in the distance. They're very far apart from one another, so they're very spread out. And because of that, the lighting is very sparse, and most of the park, most of the area is left in darkness, right? Which also makes it kind of seem like it's a very quiet and eerie place. So it's like it's eerie, it's almost kind of scary, feels a little bit spooky, maybe. Yeah, so I might say that about this picture. And just because of the lack of lighting, people might have safety concerns, right? So that is a thing as well. Yeah, so feel free, you know, if you can think of other words too to describe these photos, go ahead, leave them in the chat, or you can leave them in a comment down below as well too, so we can have all of those ideas as a reference. Yeah, so now that we have some basic vocabulary for talking about these photos, let's think about the questions. So, how can these things be improved by smart technology? Right? So, and like I said too, we only have to talk about 2 photos, right? So I think we are going to talk about this photo. We're going to talk about this one. We're going to talk about this one. So thinking about smart technologies, thinking about those devices, how we could use the internet to make it better. Yeah, let's think about the traffic jam. So one thing they could potentially do is, you know, add smart traffic lights, and they would basically change, or they would adjust in real time. So what does that mean? So if something happens in real time, it happens right away. There's no delay. Like, as I do this live, it's happening in real time. So you could write a comment to me right now if you're in the chat. I would receive that comment and I would respond to you instantly, because all of this is happening in real time. However, if you were watching this as a YouTube video afterwards, that is not in real time. So it happened afterwards. So in this case, they would use the information to manage the traffic lights in real time. And they could change the lighting, and that would help adjust the traffic flow. So we'll often talk about the flow of traffic, so how easily cars and vehicles move through space. So they would take information about the flow of traffic, and then they would use it to adjust the lights and things like that. And then that obviously would reduce congestion. So it would make the congestion, make the blockage less. It would help on busy roads, right? So that would be something. You know, another thing too, I think. Another thing that smart technology can do is use AI, right? So use artificial intelligence. And maybe AI could predict, so try to estimate in advance based on past information about what's going to happen in the future. So maybe they could predict, they could analyze, or they can predict traffic patterns. And maybe AI could suggest different routes, so different ways to go to the drivers, so they could then avoid the traffic jams and things like that. So maybe instead of suggesting a route that would go through an area with heavy traffic. It would suggest a area that would kind of go around that, maybe, or something like that. So yeah, so maybe we could use artificial intelligence there to help analyze the information, keep drivers informed, maybe, something like that. Another thing too as well, one good way to get many cars off the roads is to carpool. So to carpool basically is when multiple people, they travel together in one vehicle. So maybe multiple people work at the same location, so they will all share a car and they will go together instead of everybody driving in their own vehicles. So, maybe there could be some carpool apps or something. So, like little phone apps that would connect people to one another, and then they would do trips together. And then that could potentially cut down on the number of cars on the road, which would also improve the flow of traffic. It would reduce congestion. It would lessen traffic jams. So that could potentially be something. And thinking about the retail store, maybe. So right now it looks like all of these checkouts they have cashiers, so they have people working there, and these people have to interact with those people to pay for their products and leave, right? But maybe they could do self-service checkouts or self-checkouts, which is basically where customers would go. They don't have to interact with any person, but they would scan and they would pay for their items themselves. And in theory, they would be able to pay for their purchases and leave the store faster that way. So if they scan their product, they take it, there's the little barcode on the bottom, and you would make the machine sort of read that barcode, so you could scan it. That's what we would call that action. And then they would pay for those items, and everything like that. So that could potentially be one thing we could do. Another thing as well, too, because we're, talking about having to deal with the cashiers and things like that. Maybe they could use contactless payment options. So something contactless, contact refers to sort of like touching or sort of being like having to connect with people or something. But maybe they could use contactless payment options so they can make purchases more easily and they don't have to handle cash. So maybe some examples of a contactless payment option would be using your phone, you scan it, and then that would pay for your purchases that way. Also, maybe little key fobs, again, where you would, pay with by scanning the key fob. Also, too, you can scan cards and things like that. So all of that is a little bit faster than having to get out the cash, get out the real money, hand it to the cashier, they give you your change and things like that. So it's a lot faster using those contactless payment options. And it's a lot more accurate as well, too, right? So there could be less mistakes. So that could make shopping a little bit more efficient, right? Potentially too, I mean, maybe there's some way they could digitally manage the queue as well, right? So we were talking about this lineup, talking about the queues. All of these people are standing in line, right? But maybe they could use some sort of system, like, I don't know, to alert customers about when it's their turn to pay at the registers. And then they could browse, so then they could walk around, they could look at other items in the store, and just be alerted or get notified when it is their turn to pay. And they could do that instead of standing in line. So, I mean, that could potentially be something. Wouldn't that be cool? You get like a little text message on your phone when it's your turn to pay instead of having to stand here and wait. So, I don't know. Kind of like thinking about what could happen. Lots of different opportunities with technology, right? Maybe even like, I don't know, smart carts. That could be something. So a cart is basically this thing here, or you know, in British English we call it a trolley. But yeah, so this shopping cart, maybe that's smart. Maybe that uses technology somehow. Maybe it automatically scans and weighs the items when it, you know, when you put it in, and then you automatically get charged for buying that item when you leave the store or something like that. So lots of ideas, right? All of that would sort of cut down. It would get people out faster, right? So I don't know, some different ideas here, right? You have other ideas too. Throw them out there. So we can see what other kind of ideas we can come up with, what other kind of vocabulary we can think of for talking about these pictures. Yeah, but lots of different ideas, right? And so now that we have these ideas, let's think about how people might benefit from those improvements. So benefit from the, you know, the smart technology initiatives we just discussed, maybe, right? And let's practice maybe comparing and contrasting while we answer this question, right? Because we do always want to make sure that we are comparing, kind of contrasting when we talk about these questions, when we talk about the images, right? So so let's think about, you know, I don't know. Obviously, reducing traffic congestion means that commuters can get to their destinations faster, right? While using contactless payment options could mean people could leave the stores faster. So both of these things sort of speed up the flow of traffic. They help people move through the area a bit faster, right? So that could be a benefit for both of those, for both of these things, right? Both of these things would reduce wait times for people, right? So here we've managed to use some language to sort of talk about both images while talking about, you know, the benefits, right? So yeah, so both of these ideas could basically help people like get finished faster, right? So yeah, so we'll reduce traffic, commuter just will get there faster, and people will get out of the store faster, maybe, right? So that could potentially be something. And again too, right, we talked about using AI, maybe using AI to suggest alternative routes to drivers would prevent people from getting stuck in traffic, and this would lessen congestion. And a system to manage the queue could also reduce the crowds near the cash registers. So here too, we're also talking about a similarity, right? So here using AI, that will lessen the number of cars on the road, so reduce the congestion. And then also using the system to manage the queue or manage the lineup would also reduce the crowds, the number of people that are near the cash registers. So that would improve the situation a little bit as well, right? So yeah, so we could potentially say that. And let's talk about one last one, maybe. maybe smart technology would make trips for consumers safer and more efficient, while smart technology in the store would reduce thefts, right? So smart technology would make trips for consumers safer and more efficient than before, right? While smart technology in the store would reduce thefts, right? So so both of these benefits could potentially happen, right? So just some ideas, just some examples of how we can sort of connect ideas to one another. So we are actively comparing and contrasting what's happening here while we are also answering the questions, right? And making sure that we are talking about both images. So there's lots of different ways that you could approach that, lots of different language that you could use. The idea is just to make sure that you are always sort of comparing and contrasting while addressing the questions and while you're talking about the pictures. All right. Okay, so lots of different ideas. As I mentioned, if you wanted to talk more about these pictures with me, like I said before, all of this activity and the warm-up activity came from my lesson that I put together about smart cities. So if you were interested in talking about this more with me and getting some feedback, I highly recommend reading the article again. I also did a live stream, I think last week or the week before, where I went through the article, talked about some of the useful vocabulary and phrases, and went over the pronunciation of words and things like that. So you can study all of that, study the words, the vocabulary, pronunciation. You can book a class or several. I always have lots of things to talk about. And you could talk about this topic with me, do this activity with me, and you could also follow me on social media. I have a series that I'm working through right now. I'm going to look at new articles every other week, so you can definitely do that. And feel free to either book, conversational classes or even lessons if you want to get some writing feedback. So all of that is possible. Just follow me on Telegram to check out those articles. That is definitely the best place to follow along and make sure that you are staying up to date about what's happening. All right, so that is it for me and for this. Of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me directly. You can contact me here on Facebook. You can contact me on Telegram. That's probably the fastest way to do it. And feel free to check out my various accounts, social media accounts. We have a group for C1 Advanced or B2, C1 level. And there's also a group for B2 first, so the B1, B2 level students. And if you're looking to practice your speaking every single day about this activity, every single day about this topic, so talking about sustainability every single day, you can follow, my Instagram or the main Get Speaking English Telegram groups, where I share a daily speaking prompt about the topic, and you can use that to practice your speaking with. Anyways, so lots to do. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to leave a little comment down below. Lets me know that you value these kinds of lessons and that they are interesting to you. Yeah. And let me know if this was helpful. So thanks again for coming out, and I look to seeing you all next week when I look at the next article I want to check out. So thanks, everybody. All right, bye.